Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom. I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman. So for this press briefing, a quick update from me and then to your questions, which you should put in the chat, all of which we will answer this Monday, the 19th of August, day 318 of the October 7th war. We start today with sad news of our fallen IDF soldiers, 692. Since the start of this war, Major in the reserves Yotam Yitzchak Peled was 34 years old and from Rosh Ha'ayin. He was killed in battle in the center of Gaza. And Sergeant Major in the reserves Mordechai Yosef Ben Shoam was also 34 years old and from Geva Binyamin. He too was killed in battle in central Gaza. These are both devastating losses. All of us here in Israel send condolences to these dear families of our heroic fighters who fell in combat from terror attacks, and also our civilians. There are no words of mine that can assuage the pain, the terrible pain of their family and friends. We embrace these bereaved families in their most difficult hour. We are committed to the testament of the fallen to continue to absolute victory over Hamas. May the memories of our fallen heroes be a blessing forever. Next, on Secretary of State Blinken's visit in Israel today, meeting with our president this morning, the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, together with other senior ministers and officials. The Prime Minister met with the Secretary in his office in Jerusalem today. It was a positive and good-spirited meeting, a 3-hour-long meeting. The Prime Minister reiterated Israel's commitment to the latest American proposal regarding the release of our hostages, all the while taking into account Israel's security needs. Israel greatly appreciates the efforts of the US to dissuade Hamas from its refusal to agree to a deal for the release of our hostages. The Prime Minister stands firmly by the principle that the IDF will physically remain on the Philadelphia corridor, the border with Egypt, to prevent the resupply of Hamas's deadly weapons. The negotiations continue. We are working to create a framework agreement based upon the principles presented by the US in May to get our people home and achieve the other goals of the war. Just in the last 24 hours, we have seen Palestinian terror attacks. Gidon Peri, a 38-year-old Israeli father of 3 and a husband, was murdered by a Palestinian work colleague. Why? Simply because he was a Jew and an Israeli. Last night, a terror attack in Tel Aviv with Hamas claiming responsibility. This was a significant terror attack which was averted yesterday in Tel Aviv. The Palestinian with a backpack loaded with explosives exploded his charge that he was carrying before he managed to reach a more heavily populated area. This is often the way with Hamas. On the eve of potential deals to create quiet, to create peace in this region, they always try and have these terrorist outrages in order to inflame the region. It's unfortunately classic strategy, which we've become used to from the dedicated monsters of Hamas. This morning, IDF soldiers were attacked in Ya'ara, on the border with Lebanon by Hezbollah terrorists with drones. Now an update from COGAT and their work coordinating aid into Gaza. COGAT just today released another example of the systematic abuse of civilian and humanitarian infrastructure by Hamas. Yesterday, Hamas fired rockets from launchers embedded near 2 schools and a field hospital in southern Gaza. But all the while, aid continues to enter every day via all the crossings. Since the beginning of the war, more than 46,000 trucks have delivered more than 900,000 tons of humanitarian aid into Gaza. That's 80% more food compared to prior to October the 7th. On immunizations against polio in Gaza, 95% plus Gazans have been immunized against polio. And Israel is working with the World Health Organization and UNICEF to get 1.3 million other vaccines into Gaza. And More info on this is available on the COGAT website and X feed. So that's the end of our briefing today. We'll now take your questions, which you should put in the chat together with your news outlet. Thank you very much. First question here from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Firstly, Joel asks, Secretary of State Blinken said it was the last opportunity for a hostage deal. What makes it the last, or is that a political deadline? And secondly, President Herzog made clear that Hamas was refusing a deal. Why did Blinken appear to blame both sides? Thank you very much for those questions, Joel Pollack from Breitbart News. Look, I think those are questions for Secretary of State Blinken, but the Prime Minister has said that, you know, for this deal, many had claimed for months that Hamas would never agree to give up on its condition to end the war and remain in power as a condition for the deal, and proposed giving in to Hamas's demands. The Prime Minister said that they were wrong then, and they are wrong now. The Prime Minister made clear at the start of yesterday's Cabinet Minister that our negotiations team strongly insisted on this fundamental demand, vital to achieving the goals of the war. Of course, the talks are ongoing and Israel is committed to them, but the Prime Minister's made clear that Hamas has changed its position. The Prime Minister insisted that Israel remain in the Philadelphia corridor in order to prevent terrorists from rearming. Israel also insisted that on advancing a deal that will maximize the number of living hostages, and to enable the achieving of all of our war objectives. Israel is conducting these negotiations with a firm eye on the vital security interests of Israel, as opposed to those who advise that Israel just give in. Israel is engaged in these negotiations for the release of our hostages because it is a national mission of the highest order. The Prime Minister has made clear that Israel is fully prepared to be flexible for this noble mission, but be in no doubt these are very complex negotiations. Hamas is a murderous terrorist organization that is both simultaneously obstinate and at the same time uninhibited in its wickedness. Hamas did not even send a representative to the talks in Doha. Now, the Prime Minister has made clear that strong military and diplomatic pressure on Hamas and Sinwar are the way to secure the release of our hostages. Thank you. I'll take the next question from Hannah Julian in a moment. Jim Williams, I saw a question but seems to have disappeared, so perhaps you can put that again into the chat. But in the meantime, Hannah Julian from the Jewish Press has asked, is there an update on the talks specifically from Cairo? Also, when those talks conclude, if there is no agreement, what happens next? Thank you for that question, Hannah. I've given you an update that we have right now from regarding the hostage release negotiations, which we are currently engaged in. We thank our American partners for pushing these forward. We are indebted to them. But once and again, it is always Hamas which walks away at the final moment. Again and again and again, this has been shown over the last 10 months. We are in favor of negotiations and for them to be concluded successfully, and Hamas keeps walking away. Okay, that seems to be the last question here, unless there are any more other questions. No? Good. Well, in the meantime, thank you for joining us today. We'll have another briefing tomorrow at the same time. So please do stay safe, and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye now.